God is really shifting things. I mean, in Hebrews 12, we see him say very, very, very straightforwardly that I will shake not only the earth, but also the heavens. He's shifting things. And here we see him say that he is shaking those things so that those things that cannot be shaken will remain. You know, since this Daystar scandal started to unravel, since Jonathan and Susie had broke their story to the world, and if you're not caught up with that, you know, I would suggest go back, watch a plethora of videos I have done on it and a plethora of videos that many other people are doing on it. But since this story broke, there have been massive things that have happened, right? I mean, Laura Lynn dropped bombshell story after bombshell story, interviewing Denise Boggs, interviewing Debbie Lenhart. I mean, the list goes on. She's had a litany of people on her show talking about the core issue that has been going on at Daystar. And since Laura Lynn dropped her story, she was the first to drop out of Daystar scandal, actually, by the way. Daystar had to prop itself up and do massive PR attempts to save face. Of course, we have the infamous Daystar executive calling Laura Lynn a clickbait cockroach. And sleight of hand, he wasn't just calling her a clickbait cockroach. He was calling every one of us clickbait cockroaches. And if that wasn't bad enough, like I said, the conversation that Laura Lynn had with Denise Boggs and Debbie Lionheart only revealed even more truth, that Daystar really is covering up the truth regarding to Jonathan and Susie's daughter and what had happened to her. Now, we had prosecutors give their perspectives on the issue at hand, and since then we've had ministries falling one by one off the network. Ministries like Ed Young from Winning Walk, James Merritt from Touching Lives, the Dr. Wonders Workshop, which is a children's program, Ashley and Carly Terrida's Abundant Life, Danette Crawford, Joyce Myers from Enjoying Everyday Life, Lawson Purdue, Grace for Today, Jesse Duplantis, Lance Wallnow. We might have to get into Lance Wallnow too, because I think he's probably the greatest gaslighter that the body has today in regards to what's going on with Daystar. Like I said, Laura Lynn had dropped, Baruch Corman from Love Israel, and the list goes on how many people had dropped. 16. But we have a different problem now that is also connected to Daystar, and that is the problem of Shawn Bolz. Now, regardless of what your position is on prophecy today, Shawn Bolz is linked to Joni Lamb because Joni Lamb has mentioned his name numerous times in regards to how she holds his prophecies in high regard. Now, my good friend Joshua does a great job at going through what exactly we're seeing with this Shawn Bolz connection, Bethel ministry, the issue of data mining, which is practically gathering information on someone before you give them quote unquote a word of knowledge. It's just absurd. Now, like I said before, if you don't know who Shawn Bolz is, he has been connected to Bethel for a long time, and Bill Johnson has regarded him as a very well-respected individual. But he has since come under fire, giving false prophecies, like I said, through the tactic of what we call data mining. Yeah, y'all just got to hear this one. Right?
One of our dearest friends, one of our most trusted friends, is Shawn Bolz. So we're going to try this out. Please, Jesus, come. Is there a Kenny or Kenneth Ray and a Patricia Liu who came together? A Kenny or Kenneth Ray and a Patricia Liu who came together. Help me find them. Are they here? Are they real? Come on! One of our dearest friends, one of our...
Now, I'm just gonna play Joss's take on this.
Good evidence in this case. Again, folks, these are still allegations against Shawn at this point. These things might have to go to court and get final answers on, as Chris Valentin alluded to, but the facts are not looking good. Now I'm going to play a clip by the Monoprophets showing what this would look like.
Jeff, you've done some digging into this. Do you want to bring out some of the evidence of why it is we're making these accusations?
Sure. All right. So this is a post by Matthew Hartkey back in 2017. He explicitly starts reviewing the Azusa Now prophetic words that Shawn released, which what I'm about to say is hearsay. That this was the moment where he was initially exposed to both Bethel and CFAN ministries, was when he was sharing prophetic words from the stage from Azusa Now. Now, this individual goes through and the links to the prophetic words and things are, you would have to go back into the history of each individual to find them if they're still existing. Several of them have been taken down from the original posting person, where they check in to the event at Azusa Now. So one of the words was calling out someone named Nelson, gave him a word about Logos and being turned into Rhema. And on the intro to his Facebook profile, Nelson said, I'm the founder at Logos High School Ministry. There's calling out a girl named Danielle, and she had a grandma, Suzanne, that she was a praying woman, and something about bowling. Well, Danielle checked into the event the day before. Her grandma, Suzanne Bowling, commented on the post that she was praying for the Holy Spirit to show up. So all of that information verifiable on Facebook. There was one couple that was called out that had a wedding website with the names of children in it. There's anniversary dates that were given in a range, so Hebrews 11, 7 to 9, and that was connected, so given a verse and then an anniversary date, but people were on their timeline on Facebook were congratulating them on 7th, 8th, and the 10th. And this is kind of the famous word is polka duck. Where Shawn claimed that he heard God say polka duck, and elaborates it's a clothing company on Etsy, and he calls the woman and her husband forward, and then says that he's mining for gold, but you got salt, and the company that the man owns is the salt of the earth. Again, they checked in. They checked into the event the day before. All of that information is on their Facebook profile. And it's one thing to have, a piece of information that's on somebody's Facebook profile. It's another thing to have only the facts that are verifiable on somebody's Facebook being correlated to words of knowledge. And you also had a particular citation also.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So in one of the words for Azusa Now, Shawn gives a word over someone. And essentially, he calls out Kenny and Patricia, Kenny and Trisha, and then calls out all their children. He's like, I see you have 4 children, and all this stuff is readily available on Facebook. But with some of these, it's not so much about what you get right, because can you prove like this word of knowledge came from Facebook just because you can see that information on Facebook? That doesn't necessarily prove anything until you get to what they get wrong. And so when they get something wrong that they would have easily gotten from Facebook, or something that was posted on Facebook was slightly misleading, suddenly that gives you a pretty big clue. And that's exactly what happened at the Azusa Now event. Is according to a blog on Pathos. There's a user by the name of A Theology, which I suppose is supposed to be a pun there, says that Shawn lists out 4 children's names, but accidentally includes the name of a daughter-in-law, but does not include the name of of the actual daughter. One of the daughter's names is actually omitted, which if you look at the person's Facebook that Shawn would have been scrolling, that would have been pretty obvious because of the way the information is laid out. That one daughter's name is a little bit harder to find, and the daughter-in-law is listed, somewhat more prominently. And so that is how Shawn got the names wrong, and that is a pretty big tip-off.
Right. If the information that's given as words of knowledge directly correlates to the Facebook page, and the information on the Facebook page, if you wouldn't know, is different than what you would expect,
Okay, this is the Automatic Course Creator, and if you are looking for the fastest and most affordable way,
it's pretty revealing.
Okay, so good job there to the Minor Prophets podcast. These guys are charismatic.
Now, I want to tie this up into why this is an important conversation to have. Shout out to the Minor Prophets and, their YouTube channel. But they connect the dots, because I remember hearing Joni bring up Shawn Bolz to Jonathan and Susie in her meeting with Jimmy Evans. And she says that he's a trusted voice. I want you to hear her say this herself.
Waited and called you and then talked to these other people. And the other people that I talked to love my kids, but they're just like...
Can you tell me who they are? I'm just curious.
Huh?
Can you tell me who it
You're
is?
going to ask them first.
Then let me,
Oh, you have to ask them. Okay.
yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, let me ask. Well, I can tell you Shawn Bolz has been very...
Shawn Bolz is the prophetic one.
Yeah, been very encouraging to me about the whole thing. And there are other prophetic people. Chris Reed has been very encouraging to me. Nate Johnson has been very encouraged to me. Billy Burke, totally. I mean, these are all prophetic people that we trust. And so I just want y'all to have a relationship with Doug and to know him like I know him, and to be around him, and to let go of all this other stuff, and to trust me. That's all I want. So Shawn Bolz, who they hold in highest esteem, had a long conversation with him. He said, I have a friend that went through exactly the same thing and gave his blessing, prayed about it, called me back.
To the people who have prodigals. And then secondly, I saw people going through family death, a spouse or a loved one, recent death. And in the dream, I saw this like a fence because of the grief, trying to bring family division and break.
Jeremiah Johnson is another one. I believe he's an opportunist, Jeremiah Johnson. No different from his scammer friends, Shawn Bolz, who steals prophecies from people. He's another one who's coming under fire. I'll probably read Julie Roy's report on him in a second. But I want you to see the connections here. How the web of lies is connected to a web of liars, false teachers and false prophets. Almost as if the Lord had to deal with this before with Jeremiah. Y'all remember Jeremiah? One of the things that God had to constantly fight with his people were false teachers and false prophets. We have a problem with modern day prophecy because we have a problem with modern day prophets. Now, I just want you to know biblically my position on prophets and prophecy. I might have to do a whole another episode on that. I believe prophecies for today. I believe in what God in his word has said about prophecy, how necessary it is. Refer to 1 Corinthians chapter 12, 1 Corinthians chapter 13, 1 Corinthians chapter 14, where Paul makes his stance very illustriously. And he says, I wish that many of you would prophesy. So it's something I wholeheartedly believe in. But when you look at the debacle that we're dealing with when it comes to Daystar and the web of lies that we're hearing from the liars that are propagating these prophecies, we see Shawn Bolz data mining, technically gathering information on someone before he actually gives them a word of knowledge. We got some problems. So what does the Lord biblically have to say about this? Let's find out. When you look at Jeremiah 23, the Lord denounces false prophets and their false prophecies. And when we start from verse 15, this is what the Lord of armies says concerning the prophets. Behold, I'm going to feed you wormwood and make them drink poisonous water. For from the prophets of Jerusalem, ungodliness has spread into the land. So what does God do? He connects ungodliness with the prophets, with the false prophets and the false prophecies that they've been propagating from their mouths. And he says, this is what the Lord of armies says. Do not listen to the words of the prophets who are prophesying to you. They're leading you into futility. I like the way the NLT says it. He says, don't listen to these prophets when they prophesy to you, filling you with futile hopes. And we're going to read a little story just now that's trending on Twitter X on what happens when you listen to these futile prophets spreading their futile hopes. He says they tell a vision of their own imagination. You're like, Kevin, that's Old Testament. It still applies today. We're still dealing with false prophets and false prophecies today. He says, they keep saying to those who despise me, the Lord has said, you will have peace. And as for everyone who walks in the stubbornness of his own hearts, they say disaster will not come on you. But who has stood in the counsel of the Lord that he should see and hear his word? Who has paid attention to his word and listened? If you know God's word, you won't be fooled by false prophets and false prophecies. And I believe in the gifts of the Spirit. But when we're dealing with this level of debauchery in the body, not only do you have to call it out, but you have to tear it down. Because it's rising up against the knowledge of Christ. And what does Paul tell us in 2 Corinthians chapter 10? Cast down every vain argument that rises itself up against the knowledge of Christ. So we're wondering why there's so much biblical illiteracy in the body today. It's because of false prophets and false prophecies. Futile prophecies. But this story with Shawn Bolz, I don't want to get too fired up because I'll never get off here. But there's this guy on Twitter X, his name is William Matt. And he says, I've waited a long time to share this story. This story is kind of mind-blowing to me. He says, I first suspected Shawn Bolz was lying. Back in early 2016, he told me to my face that Lou Engle asked him to prophesy at the Call Azusa, but God told him no. And then several months later, he was on that stage prophesying. He says, the Call Azusa was personally ominous for me because I was forced to perform there after declining. At that time, I was just beginning to realize there was some unaddressed corruption all around me, and I no longer wanted to be associated with it. I have a long history with Lou Engle and the Call that dates back to 2005, from DC, Charlotte, Vegas, KC, and Reading. I was a part of different variations of it. I was a student of Lou's who performed at some of those events. And the actual poster boy for the Call Nashville on 7/7/7, as you can see here. Fast forward 11 years to when I sang at the Call Azusa, and you can hear trembling in my voice. It was because I knew that the prophetic movement that I had spent a decade plus of my life in was built on falsehoods. And that day for me felt like I was attending a funeral. Man. But the icing on the cake of it all was watching Shawn Bolz get on that stage and manipulate tens of thousands of people with words of knowledge. Here. Months before, I didn't suspect him lying about being visited by Paul Cain's angel, but at the Call Azusa that day, that's when I knew. It was not long after where a dear KC friend, Matthew Hark, who knows Shawn, began posting about his wordings being easily discoverable on Facebook. The same people checking into the event online were the ones getting words from the stage. So you see, he's connecting the dots here. What's coming to light, we all have Matt to thank. I trusted everything Matt said because I know his character, but I needed to test my theory. Shawn was scheduled to speak in OC, and I knew a former IHOPper on staff. So I reached out and asked him to research the names, and guess what he found? Red flags. My friend called back and confirmed that the people receiving words had checked into the event online, and he found that information easily available on all their Facebook pages. That's when I knew that Shawn Bolz was a liar and a prophetic grifter. At that time, I had been in LA a few years, and I began alerting some of our mutuals who attended his church and people in the broader movement. Folks were resistant to the idea at first, and I felt like a lone voice trying to warn people, but over time it became apparent. Former staff at his LA church and Shawn's ministry would reach out and share their concerns and their uncomfortableness with his prophetic ministry to me and others. And those years taught me how to hold space for spiritual trauma, but it also angered me that no leader was publicly doing this. Do not believe the hype. Everyone supported Shawn. Everyone gave him the mic over and over again and let him intentionally manipulate people. Everyone openly celebrated him while whispering about him behind closed doors. And for years, let me just pause on that. When he means everyone, he means mostly everyone in his connection and Shawn's web. And that includes Bethel. That includes Bill Johnson. Now, he says, for years I attended and taught at all kinds of schools of the prophets, and it was always understood that while it was okay to get a word wrong, it was not okay to prophesy information you already knew. Yet why have so many leaders refused to hold folks accountable for falsehoods? When a false word is given publicly, why won't the staff acclaimed prophets of the body of Christ correct them publicly? It is because no one actually cares about the incalculable damage done to people. These powerful men protect each other in fear that their secrets will come out. Could not have said it better myself. Proverbs 13, I believe, says, he who conceals sin shall not prosper. All of these men and women in these big ministries protect each other because all of them have skeletons and possibly dead bodies in their closet. That's why they protect each other. I've lost friendships over this, he says. I've lost mentors over this. I am not invited into Christian spaces anymore because of this. And my continual prayer is that all the spiritual abusers and their enablers are found out. Burn it all down. You know, my position, and I might have a couple people disagree with me here. God's first call to Jeremiah. Let's just go to it. Jeremiah chapter 1. Verse 10, he says, behold, I have put my words in your mouth. I have appointed you this day over the nations and over the kingdoms to root out and to tear down, to destroy and to overthrow, and then to build and to plant. So what is the call of a prophet? A real prophet's call is not just to prophesy. We get the blueprint here laid out for us through Jeremiah. And Jeremiah is one of my favorite prophets, by the way. You read his story, the amount of stuff Jeremiah went through, crying for his people, getting thrown into ditches, being left there. One of the reasons we have, and this is why I agree with him in his statement, to tear it all down, burn it all down. One of the calls of a prophet is to destroy. That makes us uncomfortable, especially when we want to protect our little high kingdoms, our little high castles, our high seats, our high esteem. So when you look at what's going on right now with Daystar and we're wondering, well, why are they trying to protect each other? Why are they trying to protect this kingdom? Well, simple. They don't want to come crumbling down. They'll even attempt to protect it against God's will. God has designed us in this hour to tear down anything that is not built on him. That's the true work of a prophet. And it makes people uncomfortable when they have skeletons in their closet, because if their kingdom gets destroyed, they get exposed. But that's exactly what God is doing right now. He's exposing. All of these stories and all these things are coming to light because they have concealed their sin. You know, my prayer as we move forward is that we go back to God's blueprint of what a prophet is supposed to do. We can pray for reformation, yes. But understand, if we're going to get back to God's original design, what man built for himself must be destroyed. It must come down so that his kingdom can rule and reign supreme above all other kingdoms. When you read Revelation chapter 11, what were the elders singing? The kingdoms of this world have become the kingdoms of our God. And they praised and worshipped him, casted their crowns before his feet. Go and read Revelation chapter 11. So all of this is coming to light, and it's for our good, for the glory of God and his bride and his church. Anyways, you guys comment below. Tell me what you think. Am I off with Shawn Bolz, Bethel, prophets, modern day prophets? And what do you think? Because I know very well what God is doing here according to his word. And he is destroying what man has built for man's glory. It's coming down. Anyways, catch y'all another one. Peace out.